I mentioned we've got executives in the news this morning, and I would ask the dozens of listeners to stick with me for a minute, because these are noteworthy announcements, possibly for different reasons, though. So Tesla announced their fourth quarter results, and they also sort of threw in at the end there, oh, by the way, the CFO is resigning.
At the end of the conference call. It's not even in the earnings release.
This is Deepak Ahuja, who, if that name is familiar to Tesla shareholders out there, it's because this is the second time he's been CFO, and this is the second time he's resigned. This is not to be confused with last year when not one but two chief accounting officers resigned, one of whom resigned after being on the job for a month.
Yep.
The other executive in the news is Bob Swan. Robert Swan. I don't know him at all, so I don't necessarily know him well enough to call him Bob. Interim CEO of Intel, who has just been named full-time. They've removed the interim label. The reason this is interesting is because the board of directors had been looking for a replacement, and Swan had been out doing interviews over the last couple of weeks talking about how we're going to have a new CEO. And they appear to have locked in on a candidate, gotten far down the road, and couldn't close the deal for whatever reason. And so Swan, who was the CFO at Intel last summer, Brian Krasanik, who was the CEO at Intel, resigned. So they make Swan the interim. And now he's got the job because apparently he was doing well enough. I find I don't own either of these stocks, and I find both of these stories unsettling.
For different reasons, definitely. So a little personal history here. My first paid interaction with the Motley Fool before I became an employee here was paying for an online seminar called When to Sell. And it gave several red flags, half a dozen or so, on when you should really think about selling your stock. And one of those was sudden resignation in the C-suite. And if you look at Tesla, I did some little digging. Over the past 4 years, Tesla's had 4 different CFOs. Actually, 2 of them were the same person, Ahuja. He was there from 2008 to 2015, from just before they went public to 2015. Then Jason Mueller took that job for 14 months, left in early 2017. And he announced just at the same earnings 2 years ago that Tesla just had, just before the saying, "I'll be here until the 10K is filed, then bye." And then Ahuja came back from retirement to step in, and he's been there for a couple of years now. And now it's Zach Kirkhorn.
I think we'll just call him Zach.
Zach. Mr. Zach is stepping up from he had a role in finance, but it's escaping me at the moment.
But this is his first job as a chief financial officer.
Yes, and he's for such a big company, that's kind of scary. And not only that, the 2 chief accounting officers you mentioned, several other high-level managers, the chief chief marketing officer? And chief human resource officer. I mean, that kind of turnover at such a high level, either Musk is really hard to work for, or there's something going on. And as an investor, it really kind of makes me leery.
Yeah, as I said, it's unsettling because, as you just said, there aren't a lot of reasons for this. Like if you're looking at what are the possible reasons for this type of revolving door in the C-suite at Tesla, the menu is not very large. In the case of
Intel,
this may be easier to explain away. It's entirely possible that they got a candidate that they really liked, and then they got hung up on the negotiating, on the details, that sort of thing. Still, if you're Swan, you got to feel a little bit like you've been jerked around a little bit just because you've been out there giving interviews saying, hey, the board is going to have a new CEO. We're excited about this, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, oh, well, this person didn't want to go to dinner with us. Do you want to go to dinner with us? Like he's the clear second choice here.
Well, that's curious. What's even curiouser is that when he was first named interim CEO, and in a meeting with employees, he said, "I don't want the full-time job." At least according to one report from somebody who was there at the meeting, but. and now he has it, and he says, I'm anxious to get going. But I'm willing to cut Intel a bit more slack. They've had 7 CEOs in 50 years. Okay, that's a pretty good record. And until it was last summer's Kurzanic, who was basically forced to leave because of some impropriety, breaking one of Intel's internal rules. They had a very smooth set of transitions of those CEOs, mostly entirely, I believe, even from the inside. And so now between Tesla's CFO thing and Intel's CEO thing, I'm willing to cut Intel more slack than Tesla.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Robert Swan, you look at his career, he's been a chief financial officer at, among other places, General Electric and eBay. I mean, he is no slouch. I am curious, though, just with this as a backdrop, as an analyst, where do executives fall on your list of how you're evaluating a company? When you're looking at a business and thinking to yourself, do I want to buy shares of this company? How soon into the process do you start looking at the leadership of the company?
It's probably the second or third thing I look at. First thing I look at is some of the financial statements, the cash flow statement, the balance sheet. Not so much the income statement, but I want to see how cash is flowing through the company and whether they're making it. And the balance sheet, how stable the company is. And if I like that and I like what the company is doing and what it's possible to do, then I look at the management, because I want a team that, one, knows what they're doing, and two, has been doing it for a while, or at least has relevant experience. I mean, naming a CFO to a longtime CFO to a CEO position, that's fine, or a chief operating officer, that's fine. But I think there's this ties also into what is the board doing, because part of the board's governance, what they should have is some sort of succession plan. I mean, not only do CEOs get fired or they resign, but they die. I mean, there was who was it? McDonald's back in the day. Cantalupo, back in 2004, died of a heart attack all of a sudden after being CEO of McDonald's for less than 2 years. But they had a candidate, a person who was able to step up rather quickly. I ran across another company, Wilhelmsen, which is an international shipping company in Scandinavia. In 1989, they lost the top 2 layers of management in an airplane crash.
Yeesh.
And it took them a while to recover from that. That's probably more than what you're expecting, but certainly a board should have some sort of succession plan. And it's the suddenness that I don't like as an analyst. But if it's well planned out and well thought out, and especially if it's telegraphed to the market, then I'm cool with it.